Chapter 2, Part 2, 72 Chevy. Before we left, we drove back to Peter's and salvaged what we could of my possessions from his front yard. The rain had damaged most of my things, and we couldn't fit any furniture into Benny's 1989 Cavalier. I grabbed what I could, and we headed south 60 miles on I-35. For the next couple months, I'd either sneak inside Benny's window or I'd sleep in Mom's backyard and avoid Guy. Benny got me a gig at the Red Lobster he worked at, but I couldn't make enough to fix my truck. When spring came, Guy had enough of me camping in their backyard and my truck busted in front of their house, so he offered me a deal. He said if he fixed my truck if I left his house and never came back. Mom didn't like the idea, but I felt like I had won the lottery. It cost plenty, but Guy stuck by our agreement. They rebuilt the transmission, put in a new radiator, carburetor, and replaced the old block with a new 350 V8 engine. It took a month for them to do it, but I'd never been more excited than the day I went to pick it up. For the first time in life, I had a huge mechanical horse to hit the trail with. My first drive was to Benny's hood to show my friends. When I got there, Benny and his friend Robert were on the porch hitting a 5-foot bong. I didn't completely stop, but I slowed down so they could see me and gently tapped my horn, letting them catch up and jump in the back. Then I hit the gas and we spent the rest of the night tearing up the hood, hopping over curbs and plowing through neatly manicured lawns. By sunrise, we were taking turns doing donuts with my truck in an empty strip mall. It was there we started talking about going on a road trip. I figured it'd be a good test for my truck, and I had promised Guy that I'd disappear from Mom's house too, but I didn't know where I was going to go, and I figured a road trip would give me time to think. Michael wanted to go to Colorado, I wanted to go to California, and Benny didn't want to leave Texas. We finally settled on South Padre Island and planned to spend about a week there, or until our money ran out. We brought hits of acid, 3 guitars, 2 fishing poles, and a big bag of reefer. None of us could play guitar, very well at least, but we called ourselves Acoustic Intentions. South Padre is known for drunken debauchery, but it's usually a quiet fishing village. Only a couple weeks a year it's packed with college kids spending their parents' money on the best years of their lives. During the drive there, Michael sat in the bed while the rest of us crammed into the cab of the truck. I lost radio reception a little south of town, but Benny and Robert kept me entertained with their old-fashioned sing-alongs. Michael was quiet the whole drive. He didn't feel much like drinking either. His ego was hurt. He had bought his first car a few months earlier, but nobody made a big deal about that. Michael was making payments on a boring sedan, but I had a loud and obnoxious neon truck from the early 1970s. We got to the quiet island in the middle of the night and had the place to ourselves. I drove my truck on the sand and Michael went to sleep in the bed. Benny and Robert organized their fishing equipment and I took a walk on the beach to enjoy the scenery and the way the sand felt in between my toes. By the time I got back, everyone was asleep. We spent the next few days playing guitar, smoking strong pot, and wandering around the island meeting tourists. We slept outside in the bed of my truck, but it didn't ever once feel like we were homeless. The stigmatized term never actually even came up. Our adventure came to an end the day we took acid at the sand dunes where the development stopped. I was tripping so hard I took off my clothes and refused to use sunscreen. It was a horrible idea that I would soon regret after acquiring the worst sunburn you'd ever seen. It was time to go home, so the 4 of us crammed into my truck. I put the key in the ignition and tried to start it, but it wouldn't turn over. It made a sound letting us know something was wrong. It was the starter, which is usually a small and inexpensive part to fix, but we were stuck on an island with no money coming down from strong acid. It was getting dark, so we left my truck on the beach and went to the first hotel we saw. Their lobby had luscious sofas and plush seats, but I was too sunburnt to sit down. Benny, Robert, and Michael got comfortable while I leaned against the side of a fancy couch. Everyone began arguing and bitching with each other. An older German lady heard our bickering and asked in a broken English what was wrong. Her eyes lit up when she saw my sunburnt torso, and she immediately pulled out a bottle of lotion and began applying it to my back and chest. She said we reminded her of her grandchildren back home. Robert spoke a little German, and he explained that my truck's starter broke and we had no way to get back to San Antonio. The woman was genuinely concerned. She asked how much we thought the part would cost. I told her about $100, and she said she'd be back in a minute with the money. While we waited in the lobby, her husband approached us and said he'd just seen his wife running frantically upstairs. She told him she met some nice American boys who needed help. We told her husband the same thing we told her, and he handed me a $100 bill. His wife came back a few minutes later, and she said she wanted to give me her business card. but when she handed me the card, I noticed another, stealthily folded, 100 on the back side of it. The woman handed me the card in a way where her husband couldn't see. I quickly put the money in my pocket and graciously thanked them both. When we left the hotel lobby, everyone was suddenly feeling good. Benny and Robert had originally considered ditching me and calling a ride from San Antonio, but they decided to stick around a little longer because of my new wealth from the nice couple from Deutschland. The first thing I did was get the four of us a cheap motel room. Then we ordered a pizza and put on the Spurs game. It was the year San Antonio won its first championship. Watching basketball helped take my mind off my burnt skin. But when the pizza was gone and the game ended, I noticed Benny and Robert whispering while going in and out of the motel room. Something was up, but I didn't care. I was in too much pain. A few minutes later, Michael told me that Benny and Robert had been calling a friend in San Antonio to come get them. They're ditching you, he said. Good, I told him. You should probably join them. I knew I wasn't getting my truck fixed anytime soon. Normally, I would have been upset about them leaving, but this evening, I was too busy popping pus bubbles and peeling dead skin off my back. They left on good terms and wished me luck fixing my truck and sunburn. I shut the door behind me and was surprised how good it felt to be alone. I had never had a motel room all to myself, and there was no better time to remind myself I could experience things I psychologically felt I didn't deserve. If I wasn't so sunburned, I would have started dancing. The next morning, I turned in the room key, strapped my guitar to my smoldered back, and began walking down the main drag of South Padre. I had to walk slow because of my sunburn, but I otherwise felt pretty darn good. The sun was shining and I was making my way through the world. I was in a quaint town on a beautiful island with nothing but a guitar, some pot, and a bunch of pus-filled skin to keep me company. When I got back to my truck on the beach, I was relieved to find it parked exactly where I left it, and I was determined to remove the bad starter. I knew it would be a challenge, but not insurmountable, so I pulled out the sad collection of tools I had with me from the glove compartment and lined them up neatly on the sand. I crawled under the truck very motivated, but it didn't take long to realize that I had about as good of a chance of fixing it as a blind man chasing after a missed bus. An hour later, I woke up to the sound of a vehicle. When I first heard it, I figured it must be a cop, but when I crawled out from under my truck, I saw a middle-aged guy with a friendly smile in an old Jeep. The Jeep was a service vehicle, and the guy was apparently some sort of volunteer who pulled motorists out of the sand and fixed people's flats. He asked if I needed a tow. I told him my situation, and he offered to give me a ride to the parts store in Port Isabel. Before we left, he helped me take off the bad starter. On the drive back from Port Isabel, we stopped for hamburgers and milkshakes. You could tell this guy hadn't spoken to anyone in a while because he was very chatty. At first, I worried he was gay and might try to hit on me, but then he started talking about his wife who left him, and I realized he just wanted someone to talk to. The stranger helped me put on the new starter, and after we fixed it, I followed him to his place where we got drunk and made grilled steak fajitas. A few hours later, I fell asleep on a hammock in his backyard. I tried to sneak away early in the morning without saying goodbye, but he heard my truck start, ran outside, and tossed me a bottle of aloe. I drove back to San Antonio slowly with the pus from my half-skinned back acting as an adhesive, sticking me to the ripped-up upholstery. I stared out my bug-splattered windshield while I drove deep into the Texas landscape, questioning my current situation and state of mind. My truck was quiet and peaceful, but I didn't have that warm feeling you get when you're almost home from a long road trip. I wondered what I was in such a hurry to get back to. I agreed not to go to Mom's house anymore. My friends left me rot on an island. I didn't have any money, and I couldn't think of anyone to call. The Pew Research Center estimates that 37% of the people in the United States have never left the town they were born. 80% stay within a 100-mile radius their entire lives. The majority of humans spend their entire time on this planet near an area they consider safe. You lose a sense of security in a new place, albeit a false one. That was chapter 2 of my book, Gonzo Education, written by me, Gregory Brandt. That's a picture of me. Normally I wear contact lenses and I don't have a shaved head. But it's a new look I'm doing, right? But overall, I spent a lot of time working on this book. I spent over 5,000 hours working on it. It's available on Amazon or Kindle for free. It's less than $10. After reading it just now out loud, I've read it out loud before. I've had this printed out over 20 different times, but each time I had to edit it because I wasn't satisfied with it. Like Ernest Hemingway says, good writing is really good editing. All the greatest writers had to re-edit and re-edit and re-edit their book. Even Jack Kerouac's manuscript of On the Road, he may have typed it in one session, but he had to re-edit and re-edit and re-edit it. And so I'm really happy without having any help or any editor or anything, getting it as good as quality as this. If you look at the other books in this genre, the homeless genre or whatever, there's one that was selling decently well that about a woman who lived in a Walmart parking lot. I'm just saying, like, if you look at every homeless memoir, none of them add up to this. You would have this book is written so well, you would have think that I've graduated from one of the top journalism schools. Oh, that's what the book's about, So yeah, they did teach me well at journalism school, but I also did have to apply myself, and like I said, I spent thousands of hours working on this. That starts when I drop out of high school and ends when I graduate from the University of Texas. That was a very hard accomplishment. More people have walked on the moon that have dropped out of high school and graduated from UTJ school. It's one of the top J schools in the country. So I'm really proud of doing that, but I'm more proud of this book. And the college degree, it helped teach me a lot, and I learned a lot. But I didn't go to college to make money. I didn't go to college to get a particular job. But I did make this book, providing a service, telling a story, and I do expect to be financially compensated. So stick with me, and then you'll see me be rich. Ah!